keep bleeding for people who never even carried a knife wound for you. You stay at tables where the food has long turned cold, clinging to scraps of loyalty that were never real. You endure disrespect as if it were part of the contract you signed at birth. You explain. You plead. You beg for clarity, for closure, for some shard of acknowledgement. And every time you do, you hand them your dignity wrapped in paper. Stumped, delivered, you become their amusement, their validation, their power supply. You ask why you keep suffering in the same cycle. The answer is obvious. You keep playing the role of a prisoner while calling yourself free. You believe revenge is fire. You think it's loud, dramatic, an explosion of words, accusations, confrontations. You think revenge is showing them how much they hurt you by screaming louder, by writing messages, by throwing evidence of betrayal into their face. That is weakness disguised as strength. You're trying to convince them of something they already know. They already saw your devotion. They already tasted your dependence. They already calculated how much they could get away with before you'd break. When you finally lash out, you're still dancing on their battlefield, still playing their game. Noise only feeds the one who thrives on chaos. Machiavelli once warned in different words. Never waste effort proving what the enemy already understands. The true strike comes when you deny them the battlefield itself. Silence is the absence of supply lines. Silence starves them. Silence cuts off the oxygen of your attention, your explanations, your desperate attempts to be seen. Silence is not absence. It is strategy. You never realized how conditioned you were to speak, to explain, to justify. You were raised to believe closure is necessary. That conversation heals. That mutual understanding is the noble road. That is the propaganda of the weak. Those who have power never ask permission to leave. They never submit reports when they withdraw. They vanish, and the silence echoes like thunder. Why does the silent exit burn more than words? Because words give the other side a script. They know how to respond, how to twist, how to counterattack. Silence leaves them suspended in their own mind. They imagine, they obsess, they question. Was it something they did? Did you plan it for weeks? Are you waiting for them to chase? Did you finally see through them? The battlefield is inverted. They become their own torturer. They bleed out on the spear of their own uncertainty. That is why silence is the sharpest blade. But you cling to noise, because you are terrified of being unseen. You want your absence to be noticed, but you don't trust it will be. So you try to make it visible with announcements, with dramatic exits, with warnings. That is fear speaking. You're afraid that without noise, you will vanish into irrelevance. That is your weakness. That is why they owned you. Let me dismantle your illusion. You think love, loyalty, friendship, respect are built on fairness. You think if you give enough, others will recognize it and return it. This is the dream of the naive. Power is never balanced. Every bond has a chain of command, spoken or unspoken. You were conditioned not to see it, because seeing it would force you to admit you were usually at the bottom. You give because you hope giving will buy security. But in Machiavellian terms, what you are doing is feeding an enemy camp with your own supplies while your own army starves. You call it kindness. It is suicide. Think back. How many times did you beg for recognition? How many times did you offer explanations, hoping the other would finally understand? Each time, you opened your fortress gates and let them stroll inside. You taught them your weaknesses, your soft spots, your insecurities. You thought transparency built trust. In reality, transparency disarmed you. On the battlefield of power, the more they know of your inner terrain, the easier it is to march through and conquer. Machiavellian strategy dictates reconnaissance is sacred. You scout them. You study them. You gather intelligence. You reveal nothing. That is how you gain advantage. But you did the opposite. You broadcast your maps. You gave away your weapons. You believed in fairness. They believed in winning. That is why you are wounded. Do you want the brutal truth? The silent exit is the only move left when you have already surrendered too much. You cannot recover what you gave. You cannot erase the humiliation of begging. You cannot rebuild respect in the eyes of those who saw you crawl. The only strategy is withdrawal, without announcement. You burn the bridge not with fire, but with absence. You remove yourself from their supply chains. You leave them starving, not because you hate them, but because they cannot feed on you anymore. That is not healing. That is war. Do you know the cost of staying? The longer you remain in orbit around those who exploit your loyalty, the deeper your chains sink. You teach them your compliance is infinite. You confirm their strategy works. You become less than an equal. You become infrastructure, a resource. The moment you are seen as resource, you are no longer seen as human. They don't care about your emotions. They care about whether you show up, whether you provide, whether you entertain, whether you absorb their chaos. And when you collapse, they replace you. You want to know why you keep feeling disposable? Because you are disposable to them. The proof is in the silence they showed you first. Did they ever ask how you felt before you shattered? Did they ever apologize without being cornered? Did they ever stay awake at night, calculating how to protect your loyalty? No, because they never saw you as an equal. They saw you as supply. Now hear me. Revenge is not for their pain. Revenge is for your liberation. The silent exit is not about making them suffer. It is about ending the war you never knew you were fighting. It is about cutting off their access to your energy. It is about reclaiming your position as commander of your own army. You do not broadcast it. You do not warn them. You vanish. And in that vanishing, you become untouchable. Niccolo Machiavelli would have called this ruthless necessity, because hesitation is fatal. You think you are being moral by explaining your departure. But explanation is weakness, disguised as decency. Your enemy uses your morality as a leash. They know you cannot leave without talking. So they prepare traps in every conversation. They twist your words. They weaponize your guilt. They drag you back into the mud. A true strategist cuts the rope without a speech. This is why silence is feared. It is final. It cannot be negotiated. It leaves no openings for counterattack. It turns the battlefield to ash without firing a shot. And that is why those who once thought they owned you will lose their mind when you disappear. They will not rage at you in person. They will rage at themselves in private. They will replay every interaction. They will torment themselves with theories. And every second of that torment is energy. You no longer bleed. That is the only revenge worth taking. But you must face the truth. You were weak because you were conditioned to equate love with obedience. You were trained to believe loyalty means staying even when disrespected. You wore chains and called them devotion. You mistook endurance for strength. That is why you were devoured. They did not break you. You broke yourself by refusing to see the war you were in. Wake up. Stop pretending this is about healing. Stop pretending silence is peace. Silence is strategy. Silence is brutality. Silence is the blade that cuts cleaner than screams. The silent exit is the weapon you refused to carry because you feared it would make you heartless. But what has your heart earned you so far? How much has compassion bought you on the battlefield of power? Compassion without strategy is self-slaughter. The choice is yours. Stay and keep feeding them until you collapse. Or vanish and let your absence become the ghost that haunts them. This is not forgiveness. This is not reconciliation. This is war. And in war, survival is victory. You crave final words. But final words are weakness. The enemy thrives on knowing what page you are on. They adjust. They pivot. They calculate. When you tell them why you leave, you grant them intelligence. That is reconnaissance handed freely. A true strategist dénie reconnaissance. You let them wonder. You let them spiral. Their own imagination becomes a spy working against them. You think the battlefield is visible, but it is not. The battlefield is psychological. The supply line is your attention. The weapon is your presence. Every word, every explanation, every call, every text, every appearance is fuel. Remove it, and the machine collapses. No speeches, no closure, just absence. That absence becomes the poison that corrodes their certainty. But first, you must strip yourself of the illusion that you owe them anything. You owe nothing to those who violated respect. You owe nothing to those who fed on your silence while giving you none. You owe nothing to those who watched you crawl and gave you dust. The chains you feel are not duty. They are conditioning. They drilled you to feel guilt at the idea of leaving without explanation. That guilt is psychological warfare. It is not morality. It is submission. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that morality is a weapon used by the powerful to restrain the weak. They tell you silence is cruel, so you explain yourself. They tell you absence is betrayal, so you stay chained. They write the script that keeps you docile, while they themselves vanish when it suits them. That is the hypocrisy of power. You followed their script. You stayed soft. That is why you suffer. Now, consider the cost of clinging to noise. Every message you send is a supply cart crossing enemy lines. Every confrontation is a battle you cannot win, because the terrain is theirs. You argue. They dismiss. You cry. They mock. You explain. They twist. Every word is ammunition turned against you. Do you not see? You fight on their soil. You bleed in their arena. You call it love, but it is war you are losing. The silent exit is retreat with dignity intact. It is not surrender. It is regrouping. You pull your forces back. You cut their access. You fortify your camp. You let them burn their own rations, wondering where you went. You remove yourself from their war, and suddenly, they are naked. They no longer know your moves. They no longer control your pace. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is terror. Understand this. The one who leaves silently controls the narrative. They may spread rumors. They may invent stories. They may lie. None of it matters, because you are not there to correct it. You deny them the satisfaction of response. They throw stones into empty fields. The silence absorbs everything. It leaves them shouting into void. That void is your fortress. But to execute this strategy, you must kill your addiction to being seen. That is the hardest part. You crave validation. You crave recognition of your pain. You want them to know how much they cost you. You want them to kneel, to admit, to regret. That craving is your weakness. They know it. They use it. They withhold acknowledgement because they know it keeps you tethered. You keep coming back, desperate to be seen. That desperation is the leash. Cut it. Machiavellian clarity demands this. Recognition is irrelevant. Results are everything. The result of silence is power. The result of noise is humiliation. Which do you want? Do not answer with your emotions. Answer with your strategy. Emotions keep you crawling. Strategy gets you free. Let me burn your illusions further. You think silence means you disappear. You think no one will notice. That is wrong. Absence is the loudest sound. Humans fear the void. They can justify your anger. They can rationalize your confrontation. They can dismiss your words. But absence Absence cannot be dismissed. It forces them to face their own weakness. They cannot explain why you stopped supplying them. They cannot rewrite the story when there are no words to twist. Absence haunts. Absence destabilizes. Absence forces reflection. That is why silence is the most brutal revenge. You must learn to weaponize discipline. Silence requires discipline sharper than steel. It requires walking past the battlefield without firing a single arrow, even when your hands itch for release. It requires standing tall while their provocations attempt to drag you back into noise. It requires enduring the ache of invisibility until invisibility transforms into strength. That is war. War is not about release. War is about victory. If you stay, you lose. If you explain, you lose. If you shout, you lose. The only winning move is withdrawal without sound. This is not passivity. This is cold strategy. You are not avoiding confrontation. You are denying the enemy confrontation altogether. You leave them armed with weapons they cannot fire because there is no target. That is how empires collapse. Not with noise. With starvation. You want power? Then act like a commander, not a captive. Commanders do not beg. Commanders do not explain. Commanders make moves in silence and watch the field shift. A commander knows that silence is psychological warfare, and psychological warfare wins battles before armies clash. And do not lie to yourself. You already tried everything else. You tried conversation. You tried patience. You tried forgiveness. You tried confrontation. None of it gave you respect. None of it restored balance. You are not misunderstood. You are not unlucky. You are unstrategic. That ends now. You will not heal by staying. You will not find justice in their words. You will not gain peace through their acknowledgement. You will only rot slower. Silent exit is not about peace. Silent exit is about reclaiming command. It is the line where you stop being supply and start being sovereign. And make no mistake, when you go silent, they will test you. They will provoke. They will bait. They will pretend to collapse to lure you back. They will accuse you of cruelty, of betrayal, of heartlessness. Do not flinch. Every response is a broken flank in your fortress. Hold, endure, absorb their noise with silence. They cannot fight a war against someone who no longer shows up on the field. This is your transformation. From victim to strategist, from pawn to commander, from supply line to sovereign fortress. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not cowardice. Silence is weaponized absence. And absence is the battlefield where you finally win. You want to believe people will change if you just wait long enough. You want to believe patience is a weapon. But patience without power is nothing but surrender dressed in noble clothing. You wait. They feed. You hope. They take. You endure. They expand. Every day you stay, their dominance grows and your strength rots. This is the hidden attrition war you never named. Attrition devours the weak in silence. While they convince themselves they are merciful, Machiavelli knew the longer a ruler tolerates disobedience, the weaker he becomes in the eyes of his subjects. Substitute ruler with you, and subjects with those who consume your loyalty. And the equation is clear. Your delay is their victory. Your waiting is their triumph. The silent exit is the only maneuver that severs attrition. You walk off the field, and suddenly the war machine collapses without fuel. You cannot rebuild respect in the same arena where you lost it. That is the hardest truth you resist. You think more effort will restore balance. You think more explanation will re-establish clarity. But there is no clarity to restore. The foundation was rotten. Respect, once broken, cannot be reconstructed with words. Words are sandbags in a flood. The flood keeps coming. The only tactic is to retreat to higher ground where the flood cannot reach. And still, you resist because you fear the consequences of being unseen. You confuse visibility with worth. You think if they no longer see you, you no longer exist. That is the cage you built yourself. Your worth is not their recognition. Your worth is the silence they cannot penetrate. Your worth is the absence they cannot exploit. They think you cannot live without their attention. Prove them wrong. You don't need them to regret. You don't need them to suffer. You need them to lose access. That is revenge. Revenge is not a scream. Revenge is denied access. They want your energy, your attention, your explanations, your care. You give them nothing. You lock the gates. You let them pound their fists against stone walls until they break their own hands. That is the cruelty of silence. That is the discipline of strategy. Every time you argue, you reveal your position. Every time you justify, you reveal your weakness. Every time you demand, you reveal your hunger. The silent exit denies all of this. You vanish from their maps. They cannot locate you. They cannot measure you. They cannot predict you. And unpredictability is terror. They will spend nights constructing narratives to fill the void. That void is your weapon. Do not lie to yourself about fairness. There is no fairness on the battlefield of power. There is victory and there is defeat. When you stay explaining, you are defeated. When you leave without noise, incite's a victory, even if they never say it, even if they never admit it. Victory is not their acknowledgement. Victory is your freedom. Machiavelli wrote in his own way that it is better to be feared than loved when love cannot be trusted. You sought love where only power existed. You were deceived by their words, their temporary gestures, their calculated kindness. You thought love was mutual. It was a tactic. You were played. The only way to end the game is to flip the board. That board flips when you walk away without sound. The battlefield of silence is psychological attrition turned back against them. While you were once starving on their indifference, they now starve on your absence. While you once begged for scraps of attention, they now beg their own minds for answers. You give them nothing, and that nothing becomes poison. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, silence cuts you too. Withdrawal always does. But remember, pain is not the enemy. Pain is the purge. Pain is the training. Pain is the crucible where weakness burns out and strategy takes hold. Every commander trains soldiers through hardship because softness never wins wars. Consider your silence the training ground. Every craving to be seen is a weakness you must kill. Every urge to explain is a chain you must break. Every impulse to return is an enemy ambush you must resist. This is discipline. This is the price of transformation. You fear they will forget you. That is the illusion you must slaughter. Forgetting you is not their weapon. Forgetting you is their collapse. Because to forget you, they must stop thinking of the silence. But silence echoes. It vibrates in every corner of memory. It haunts. They may pretend to forget, but inside, the unanswered question corrodes. Why did you leave without a word? What did they miss? What did they fail to see? That corrosion is eternal. That is the cost they pay. Do not confuse silence with forgiveness. Silence is not mercy. Silence is strategy. Forgiveness can come later, in private, when the war is over. But on the battlefield, silence is the sword. Forgiveness does not win wars. Strate dos. They will call you cruel. They will say you abandoned them. They will accuse you of being heartless. Let them. Accusations are weapons. They fire into empty fields. You are not there to be hit. You are gone. And in your absence, their words fall flat. That is the power of silence. Do not look back. Do not scan the battlefield for their faces. Do not check if they regret. That is weakness. That is reconnaissance. In reverse, your enemy gaining intelligence from your need to observe. The true strategist leaves without glancing over the shoulder. Once you exit, the door is locked. Final. That is the brutality. That is the power. You must harden your mind. The war is not outside. The war is inside. You are fighting against your own conditioning, your own hunger to be seen, your own addiction to noise. That is the battle you must win. Once you win it, no enemy can touch you again, because no enemy can weaponize your need for acknowledgement if you no longer need it. That is sovereignty. Machiavelli would remind you. Sovereignty is not granted. It is seized. The silent exit is seizure of sovereignty. It is not about them. It is about you. It is the moment you stop being resource. Stop being supply. Stop being subordinate. You become your own commander. And once you claim that role, no battlefield can enslave you again. This is the brutal truth. Revenge is not spectacle. Revenge is not confrontation. Revenge is absence. Revenge is silence. Revenge is walking away and never turning back. That is how you reclaim power. That is how you end the war. That is why the silent exit is the most brutal revenge. You imagine revenge as fire, as spectacle, as triumph, visible to all. That is vanity. That is noise. True revenge is invisible, silent, executed in the shadows. The battlefield does not celebrate the commander who announces every move. The battlefield crowns the commander who vanishes from sight and leaves the enemy starving in confusion. Your silence is not cowardice. Your silence is sabotage. You are terrified that silence will make you insignificant. That is the last chain you must break. Insignificance is not your enemy. Dependence is. You do not need to matter to them. You need to matter to yourself. The battlefield shifts the moment you no longer seek their recognition. You become untouchable. They cannot chain what no longer craves their chains. That is the ultimate liberation. Machiavelli knew rulers fall when they depend on others for their security. You are no different. You begged for stability from unstable hands. You sought safety from those who benefited by keeping you vulnerable. You prayed for recognition from those who profited from your invisibility. That is the folly you must cut. The silent exit severs this dependence at its root. Do you not see? The war was never about them. It was about you, about your addiction to being needed, about your hunger to be heard, about your weakness for recognition. They only exploited what was already inside you. They only weaponized your illusions. You handed them the sword they used against you. The silent exit is not about punishing them. It is about executing yourself from the prison of illusion. It is about breaking your own chains. It is about choosing sovereignty over servitude. That is why it is brutal. Because it is not only them you abandon. It is the weak version of yourself. You must kill the urge to return. The battlefield is littered with corpses of those who turned back. They thought one more message would bring closure. One more meeting would bring peace. One more conversation would finally balance the scale. They died in the mud of false hope. Do not be one of them. Once you exit, the war is over. Burn the map. Destroy the bridge. Leave no trail. That is the brutality required. Do not mistake silence for passivity. Silence is active warfare. Every second you withhold response is a strike. Every day you remain absent is a siege. Every week you are unseen is attrition tearing at their certainty. Silence is a campaign. It is not a single move. It is not a gesture. It is a war of erosion. And erosion always wins. Yes, they will slander you. Yes, they will attempt to smear your name. Yes, They will invent stories to protect their ego. Let them. Lies are arrows shot into the night. They never reach you, because you are no longer on that field. They pierce only the air around them. Their narratives collapse when there is no opposition to fight against. Silence consume lit. Noise sustains them. You must think like a commander. A commander does not waste men on lost ground. A commander does not defend a fortress already compromised. A commander does not beg for enemy approval. A commander withdraws, regroups, and fortifies stronger elsewhere. That is your task. Withdraw, regroup, fortify, and when they finally understand what silence means, it will already be too late. They will scramble to reach you. They will attempt to reopen the supply lines. They will offer crumbs of recognition, promises of change, gestures of remorse. Do not return. Do not answer. Do not forget the war you just escaped. Every promise is bait. Every word is trap. Do not be deceived again. You think silence is easy? No. Silence is the hardest discipline. Silence requires killing your impulses. Silence requires starving your cravings. Silence requires walking past the battlefield while your enemy screams insults behind you. Silence requires becoming stone. But once you master it, you become invincible. Machiavelli would call it the cold necessity of power. The ruler who hesitates, fails. The ruler who lingers in weakness, collapses. The ruler who indulges emotion, loses command. Silence is command. Silence is control. Silence is sovereignty. This is the final choice. Continue begging. Continue explaining. Continue crawling on the battlefield of noise. Or vanish. Cut all supply. And let the silence echo as your most brutal strike. You have waited long enough. You have spoken enough. You have explained enough. Now you must do what terrifies you most. Exit. Without sound. Without trace. Without regret. And when the silence settles, you will see clearly. You will realize they were never worth the words you bled. You will realize the war was never theirs to win. It was yours to end. This is your awakening. This is your liberation. This is your revenge. The silent exit is the most brutal revenge because it is the only one that makes you untouchable. And once you are untouchable, the war is over. Now, choose. Stay and remain a resource, or vanish and reclaim command. The battlefield waits. The decision is yours.